Right here in DC, it is unmistakable, the feeling of authoritarianism taking control. And now, Donald Trump is creating his own paramilitary force. My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. If you don't live in DC, it's really difficult to describe the mood here. We have checkpoints in the streets where federal agents randomly check community members. We have federal agents on patrol on foot. They go into communities and harass people of color while they're on their porches at their own homes. Masked, armed agents are everywhere. We have armed National Guard troops everywhere. The community has definitely mobilized in many ways to protect people from the masked and armed thugs from DHS, for example. When we have these checkpoints that they set up, checking papers, community members will set up before the checkpoint and warn people that ICE is ahead so that people have time to turn around and avoid being harassed, arrested, or kidnapped and sent to Uganda. And more broadly, there are probably 20 things happening each day that prompt people to ask, why isn't this getting more attention? And that's the point. Flood the zone. Make it impossible for the average person to even follow 10% of the lawlessness coming out of this administration. So you know that's the goal. How do we get around that? You, me, everyone, we need to focus. And I'm telling this to myself too. Pick a few areas of focus and dedicate your time there because it can't be everywhere. And there are some stories that we just cannot allow to get buried. And this is one. Even though this executive order has District of Columbia in the name, I need you to understand that what this contains will not stay in Washington, D.C. The goal is for it to spread, as we've already seen with Trump and his goals to put the National Guard in other blue cities across the country. So this executive order, quote, additional measures to address the crime emergency in the District of Columbia. First, there is no crime emergency in the District of Columbia. Let's say that right now. Let's get that out of the way. There wasn't before he had armed troops walking through the streets or members of the white power gang known as Homeland Security walking the streets either, okay? I live here. I walk these streets. And I have to say, it's really quite something to behold when I hear these same dudes who purport to be supreme, the pinnacle of human ability, while simultaneously telling us they were too afraid to go to dinner until they had an armed escort. Really? They aren't embarrassed to say that? Now, buried a bit in this executive order is Donald Trump's directive to create a quick reaction force through the National Guard that could be deployed nationwide while also calling for an online portal that will allow Americans who are seemingly eager to stomp on the rights of their fellow Americans to apply and join the military force. Sound familiar? Yeah. We're talking brown shirts. We're talking mobilizing the Kyle Rittenhouses of the country at Donald Trump's direction. Let's break down this executive order. Quote, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, shall immediately begin ensuring that each state's Army National Guard and Air National Guard are resourced, trained, organized, and available to assist federal, state, and local law enforcement in quelling civil disturbances and ensuring the public safety and order whenever the circumstances necessitate, as appropriate under law. In coordination with the respective adjutants general, Pete Hegseth shall designate an appropriate number of each state's trained National Guard members to be reasonably available for rapid mobilization for such purposes. In addition, Pete Hegseth shall ensure the availability of a standing National Guard quick reaction force that shall be resourced, trained, and available for rapid nationwide deployment. Now, before we get to the brown shirts section, I just want to say that Donald Trump is not interested in following the law. At least twice this week, he has mused about dictators, how people like dictators, and he has said directly that he is the president. He can do whatever he wants.
And they say, we don't need him, freedom, freedom. He's a dictator, he's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. But then he goes on television and says, oh, Trump is a dictator, he's a dictator. And a lot of people are so the line is that I'm a dictator, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, you know, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. Governor of Illinois saying that crime has been much better in Chicago recently, and Trump is a dictator. And most people say, if you call him a dictator, that if he stops crime, he can be whatever he wants.
So when he talks about quelling civil disturbances, we know that is not what this will be used for. Just like the armed troops in the streets of Washington, D.C. is not being used for that. This is about expanding his power, period. I mean, there's no better proof, honestly, that the deploying of the National Guard to respond to crime here in D.C. was totally unnecessary and done for political purposes than this footage of the National Guard picking up trash around D.C., right? They even, look at this reporting from the Washington Post. They are now doing landscaping. Yeah, landscaping. Donald Trump says he's finally hearing that people feel safe enough to go out to dinner at night because the big bad leaves have been meticulously raked by the National Guard. Give me a fucking break. But what about incentivizing the Kyle Rittenhouses of the country to come out in the streets to do foot patrol? Trump wants to flex his fascistic impulses, and this EO goes above and beyond there. Quote, the DC Safe and Beautiful Task Force established in a previous executive order, making the District of Columbia safe and beautiful, shall establish an online portal for Americans with law enforcement or other relevant backgrounds and experience to apply to join federal law enforcement entities to support the policy goals described in the previous executive order. Each law enforcement agency that is a member of the DC Safe and Beautiful Task Force, as well as other relevant components of the Department of Justice, as the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, determines, shall further, subject to the availability of appropriations and applicable law, immediately create and begin training, manning, hiring, and equipping a specialized unit that is dedicated to ensuring public safety and order in the nation's capital, that can be deployed whenever the circumstances necessitate, and that could be deployed, subject to applicable law, in other cities where public safety and order has been lost. So an online portal where vigilantes can sign up to join the terror inflicted on whichever community Donald Trump decides to terrorize next. You saw it there. Deployed in other cities where public safety has been lost. They are here in DC where public safety is not lost. He's threatening Baltimore, Chicago, New York. People are naturally drawing comparisons to brown shirts, Nazi Germany's own paramilitary force, the SA. The SA was separate and apart from the military, but they were a violent instrument used by Hitler to gain power, committing acts of violence in the street against Hitler's political enemies. So when you hear in this executive order, quote, Americans with law enforcement or other relevant backgrounds and experience to apply to join federal law enforcement entities to support the policy goals described in another of Trump's executive orders, and you combine that with the arming of American troops in the streets, the threats to expand police and military terrorism into other blue cities, Donald Trump's now repeated references to his desire to control crime that doesn't exist, and his normalizing of the word dictator, you start to get a brief glimpse of where we are headed with this. And it's bad. Very bad. Where are we headed with Trump's paramilitary force? Just look at the history books, guys. Now, the fear here is, what happens when these masked federal agents who are terrorizing communities end up in a violent conflict, when it's not just sub guy, sandwich guy throwing a sandwich at someone? It will be an excuse for more force, for Donald Trump to expand his fascistic goals. So where does that leave us? In a poor spot. But here's what needs to start now. Democratic leaders need to start having a daily press conference listing out Donald Trump's daily authoritarian actions. This serves several purposes. The main one, educating the public, many of whom are too busy trying to survive, to pay attention to the fact that our democracy is rapidly being eroded with each hour that passes. These daily press conferences could also give comfort to people who are afraid. It could give them practical information on what they can be doing to get involved and protect their community. Most importantly, it would create a record of what is happening here, because right now it's a patchwork. There's no uniform approach. There's little guidance. We're all out here trying our best, but Democratic leadership has the resources. They have the platform. They have everything to make this happen. So I would ask that you call your representatives, your senators, and you tell them, we need a daily press briefing from Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries right now. Stop waiting for the consultants to tell you what language to use. Stop waiting to see if the polls tell you if it's popular. We are nearing the point of no return, and many argue that, frankly, we're beyond it. But we can't give up because there's too much at risk. So instead of giving my number for you to call me and tell me what you think, I'm going to give you the number of the Capitol switchboard and ask that you call your representatives, your senators, demand that they show up in this moment, 202-224-3121. Schumer and Jeffries lead now, please. Everyone else, tell me what you think in the comments below. Offer words of encouragement to someone in the comments below. You can support my work by becoming a channel member by clicking the join button for as little as $1.99 a month, or by going to patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast. Follow me on social media. I'm at Brittany Page, Brittany E. Page everywhere. As always, thanks for being here. Take care, and I'll see you next time.